Get started with our next topic, which is about creating a high performing team. Okay. Now, first of all, let us take a look at this case study. This is not just a case study. This is also going to be kind of a example or kind of a reference point that we'll use as we move forward with the course content. So what is this case study about, or rather, what is this situation or scenario about? Is that there is a runtime initiative by an organization by the name of Zini Inc. What is this initiative? This is an initiative in which every year 40 top employees are selected for an overseas tour. Okay. Now, this is a company sponsored trip, and employees also have the option of taking their family along with them on the trip. Now, you have been assigned the responsibility to ensure that this runtime initiative is organized efficiently and without any particular incidents. So, as I was mentioning previously, what do we do when we start working on a project first? Right? First of all, before the project even starts, we need to identify the team. We need to build the team. Right? We need to create a high performing team, which comes from the people domain. All right. This particular task is part of the people domain. Now, when we are creating the team, first of all, we will build the team. Then we will also define the ground rules. Then we will try to negotiate our project agreements. If required, train and empower the team members and stakeholders. Right? Then engage and support the virtual teams if at all we are working with virtual teams. And then eventually build a shared understanding about the whole project. These are the various types of undertaking or activities that we perform when we are trying to build a team, one after the other in a sequence, or sometimes in parallel also. Because, like, for example, training team members might be a lengthier process. So that is why we might be running the trainings in parallel. Correct? Now, this is a task. Creating a high performing team is a task. What are the enablers for this? The enablers are appraising the stakeholder skills, because I hope we all understand at this point in time that our stakeholders are not necessarily only the external stakeholders. There are also internal stakeholders, the project team, the project sponsors, the supporting teams such as the IT or the administrative or the financial teams. Right? So first of all, we need to appraise the stakeholder skills. Then only we will be eventually able to train them if required or empower them if required. Correct? Similarly, deduce the project resource requirements. At what skill set level they should be at. What is the gap that exists in those skill sets, if any? What should be the expertise level of those resources? We need to identify and recognize that. Then continuously assess and refresh the team skills to meet project needs. Because if in case the skill sets are not up to the mark based on the evolving landscape of the project, in that case, you cannot just throw away a project resource and onboard a new resource. Because we all understand that onboarding a new resource is a much more costlier undertaking, much more costlier affair, right? So rather than doing that, it would make more sense of continuously assessing them and refreshing their skills to ensure that they are relevant to the project's requirements. And also maintain the team and knowledge transfers, right? Then, from a deliverables point of view, what all will be our deliverables? The skill sets of the resources will be our deliverables. the technology on which these resources will be working on, or the technology that these resources will be using for undertaking the runtime initiative and making it a success. That will be our deliverable. Our resource schedule will be one of our deliverables. The resources assignment or the rates at which the resources are onboarded or are paid will be our deliverables. Now, again, when we talk about the enablers, when we talk about the deliverables, when we talk about the tools under each of these tasks, these are not mandatory activities. PMI talks about tailoring your project activities and tasks based on your own project's context, right? So these are some of the things that you can do. If you want to do something else which still lies within the PMI guardrails, as a project manager, you have the leniency of doing that. All right. Now, from a tools perspective, we will be able to create our RACI matrix, or we will be able to update our RACI matrix. We will be able to use our pre-assignment tools. If in case we are using a certain tool for task assignment or resource assignment or WBS assignment to our resources, we can use those tools. And virtual teams, there are certain tools that we use with virtual teams, right? Such as the virtual meeting tools, such as Teams, or what was the other one? Which one we are using right now? Zoom, sorry, I forgot. So these kind of tools we can use, correct, when we are building a team. Now, what is the flow of building a team? First of all, the project team is identified, right? For the project team, the requirements are, the project team's members' requirements are identified. Based on that, the stakeholders are identified. Based on the identification, the stakeholder register is created. Once the stakeholder register is created, the RACI matrix or RACI chart is created. Correct? Okay. Talking about RACI chart or RACI matrix, how many people can be accountable for a particular activity or task or deliverable? Who can answer me this question? One person. Absolutely. This is a rule of thumb. Always remember this. In RACI chart or in RACI matrix, there can be n number of people responsible or consulted or informed about a particular deliverable or activity. But there will only be one person accountable for that. Right? This is a rule of thumb for RACI chart. Now, once the RACI chart has been created, the team skills are appraised. Based on that, the pre-assignment tools are used. We also take into consideration the diversity and inclusion. Then, after all the resources are identified, their skill sets are analyzed and their trainings are given if required. At this point in time, we create our resource management plan. Right? In the resource management plan, if in case we have our virtual resources onboarded, in that case, we also apply our virtual teams process. Once that happens, we move on to assigning the project responsibilities to each of these resources, which eventually leads us to completing the resource assignment piece of work. After the resource assignment is done, we keep on analyzing and monitoring the team's performance, and if required, we also help the team to nurture their own skill sets. Okay, then once that happens, the knowledge transfer happens between all the teams, because eventually we are a cross-functional team. Correct? So this is how our build a team, sequence flows. Right? Now, moving on to the next slide. Here we are building a team, correct? Our agenda from an enabler point of view has been presented to us. Now, which particular task or which particular activity should lie, you should be able to identify that when you are presented with an enabler or when you are presented with a task. Right? So for you to easily recognize that, easily identify that, how you can club together certain activities when you're trying to build a team, this chart is presented to you, wherein the enablers are deducing the project resource requirements, appraising the stakeholder skills, continuously assessing and refreshing the team skills to meet the project requirements, and then maintaining the team and the knowledge transfer. Then on the second enabler, we have the project team and we have the project team member requirements. Then we can group together or club together the stakeholder identification, stakeholder registry and register and the risk chart. From team's point of view, we can club together the team skills appraisal, the diversity and inclusion, and the pre-assignment tools. Right? This is how we can club together various enablers. We can group them together and we can execute them, so that eventually the task which we have undertaken, in this case, building a team, can be flawlessly executed and completed. That is the point behind having enablers specified or presented to you in your content. All right. Any questions on this? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Moving on. Sorry. The roles of the people on a project can include our project management staff. What is our project management staff? It is generally the staff who are assigned to the PMO. Right? Those are our project management staff. Most of the times our resource managers are our project management staff. In certain cases, our financial accountants can be our project management staff. They are not part of the project team, but they are supporting the project team. That is why they are known as the project management staff. Then who are the project staff? Essentially the project resources who are directly involved with the project. Then we have the supporting experts, especially the SMEs, from whom we can take some guidance and judgment. Then we have the users or customer representatives, who represent the customer from the customer side or from the end user point of view, right? The super users, so to say. Then we have the sellers and the business partners, right? These all are some of the stakeholders or some of the resources we might be working with when we are trying to execute a project. Okay, when we are talking about the team, the project team or the project resources, there are certain best practices that we need to take into consideration or take into account. First of all, avoid the single point of failures. Okay, so for that, create generalizing specialists. Essentially trying to say that you should be having a cross-functional team, wherein if in case one resource is falling back, is running low on capacity, at least some other resource can pitch in and can take over that piece of work. And also consider requirements for both the team members as well as the physical resources. When we talk about resource management, we talk about the MMM, man, machine, and material. So the machine essentially falls under the physical resource category. All right. So when you are considering building the team for the project, you should not only be focused on the human resources, you should also be focused on the physical resources. That way, you can avoid the failures as much as you can. Now, we also spoke about identification of stakeholders. So, who is a stakeholder? Who can tell me that? Any answers?
Yes, stakeholder is any person or any entity which is impacted during the project. It may be your project team, external partners, or the internal team.
Absolutely correct. Go on.
I know. That's it from my side.
Okay. One small but important aspect you missed in this definition. That is, a stakeholder is a person or entity who can be or perceived to be impacted by the project's outcome. This perception is also important for us to identify as a project manager. Right? Yeah. So, rest is absolutely correct. Stakeholder is someone who is affected by the project's outcome, who is perceived to be affected by the project's outcome, or who can affect the project's outcome also. So therefore, it is important for a project manager to identify, engage, and monitor the stakeholders as we move forward and as we create our team, as we build our team, right? To make sure that we are engaging and we are monitoring our stakeholders appropriately, there are certain interpersonal skills that each of these project team members need to establish. First of all, ensuring that the conflict management is taken care of. Right? Conflict management rules, conflict management, not rules, conflict management ground rules, conflict management best practices, how those conflicts will be resolved, the identification of those methods, this all should be identified beforehand. Then comes the cultural awareness. Okay, just give me a second. Give me a second, please. I'm sorry about that. So, coming back to the interpersonal skills, the cultural awareness, that is also something we need to take into account, we need to take into consideration. You might remember this incident which happened in recent past, wherein Beyonce was required to change the lyrics of one of her songs that she released. Have you heard about that news? Wherein she used a word which was which meant something else in the US, and it had a completely different meaning in Australia. So this kind of cultural awareness should also be taken into consideration when we are engaging with the stakeholders, right? Because whenever we are talking or whenever we are dealing with human resources, these kind of things always come into play. Apart from this, Was somebody saying something? I see a chat. Okay. Apart from this, the decision-making skills, the facilitation skills, the leadership skills, our meeting management and hygiene skills, negotiating, networking, observation or conversation with all the stakeholders, with all the human resources involved, the servant leadership style, which is something that Agile talks about a lot, and the team building skills. All these has to be taken into consideration, has to be applied when we are working on building a team. Now, I would assume that you already understand what decision making or facilitation or meeting management, negotiation, networking, team building, observation, conversation means. There is something that I specifically would like to call out and discuss about, which is servant leadership. Because servant leadership is a topic from which we have been seeing questions coming consistently in the certification examination, even if it is just a single one-liner question. Now, what is servant leadership? Servant leadership, as the name suggests, is a leadership style in which you serve the team. You do not act as if you are a leader, you are a king, and your team members are your subjects. You act as if you are the servant and you are working as per what the team's requirements are. Right? This is just a change in your approach as a leader, wherein you are trying to serve and make sure that the team is nurtured. That is what is our servant leadership. Now, coming back to our same case study, who can tell me, apart from these identified stakeholders, who all can be our stakeholders in that case study? Apart from the ones which have already been identified.
Customers.
Customers, but here the customer is the employee.
Employee family members.
Correct, family members. The consulate can be one of the stakeholders, because if they do not clear the visa, if in case there's a visa required to the destination country, in that case, this initiative's success will be affected. So the consulate can be one of the stakeholders, isn't it? If in case the travel is too long from the office to the airport, and if you are arranging for some kind of refreshments, in that case, a caterer can be one of the stakeholders, right? So whenever we are working on building a team, it is important for us to identify all our stakeholders. Right? Now, again, coming back to our enablers and grouping together all the relevant and respective activities that we perform. Right? So we have already discussed about the stakeholders and how we can create the team. We have also spoken about how the project team members are identified, how the stakeholders are engaged, how we can nurture our team members. Right? When we are doing this, essentially what we are doing is we are creating the resource management plan. Correct? Resource management plan is a subsidiary of the project management plan. Project management plan has various subsidiary plans such as stakeholder management, scope management, schedule management, quality management, cost management, risk management, procurement management, communication management, scope management, cost management, schedule management. We have already mentioned this, right? All these subsidiary management plans put together, when integrated together, creates the project management plan. All right. Now, when we create our resource management plan, first of all, what we identify when we are building a team is the skill sets level. Correct? We identify the skill sets so that we can onboard the resources onto the project team. Once we have onboarded the resources to the project team, we create our resource calendar. So as a project manager and the team estimates the activity resources, they produce the resource calendar, which identifies the working days, shifts, hours, weekends, holidays, etc., the physical resource or the virtual resource availability, and the skills and experience and geographies across which those particular resources should be made available. Right? So why a resource calendar is important, and there is something called a project calendar. A project calendar is different from a resource calendar. A resource calendar specifically talks about the resources. A project calendar talks about by what point which particular tasks or activities or deliverables will be completed. Okay, so a project calendar for the current week might be talking about delivering 2 user stories if it is a agile based project, right? Whereas a resource calendar will talk about how many resources are going to work for how many hours per day on a day-by-day basis. Plus, during which shifts they will be working. If they are not working, why they are not working? Is it because it is a weekend, or is it because it is a holiday, or is it because it is a leave? Those kind of information will be covered in a resource calendar. This information is not captured in the project calendar. But again, from a practicality standpoint, you always have the option of creating one document and capturing everything into it, which is kind of merging the resource calendar with the project calendar. As a project manager, you have that leeway, but from a PMI standpoint, resource calendar and project calendar should be created separately as individual documents. All right. Then comes the physical resource availability. So the physical resource availability is sometimes dependent on the skill sets again. So if you do not have a particular type of skill set available from the same geography that you are executing your project in that case, you might even end up getting a virtual team member onboarded. So that consideration is also part of our resource calendar. And then again, the expertise level, the experience level, as well as if in case it is a virtual resource or a virtual team which has been onboarded, in that case, the geographies are also specified. Okay, now talking about our virtual teams or virtual resources. What are virtual teams? Virtual teams are defined as a group of people with a shared goal who fulfill their roles with little or no time spent meeting face to face. They are not in the same geography or in the same physical location. So virtual team presents to us many advantages, wherein the cost is low, your pool of resources is much more broader when you're trying to onboard a virtual resource. Essentially, the whole globe is available to you. The whole globe's resource pool is available to you to pick and choose, right? But at the same time, creating a virtual team also has its disadvantages, wherein bonding and identifying themselves as part of the overall team can be hard. And I'm sure you would have faced this if you would have switched jobs during the pandemic time or just after the pandemic, when most of the organizations were still allowing work from home culture, right? So this becomes an issue. Then communication and information sharing also becomes an issue. in a virtual team. And then we also have this situation wherein the individual contributors who are working in silos, who are working independently, they might be overlooked. They might not be treated as part of the team. So these kind of challenges are also there, which needs to be taken into consideration by the project team, by the project manager. All right. Now, again, we covered our resource and virtual teams and nurturing teams piece of enabler when we are talking about building the team. Moving on to an activity, quick activity. What is the scenario? You are the newly assigned project manager in charge of a major software migration, which will require the updating of more than 7,000 laptops across employees in 5 states. Due to a unique circumstance regarding this migration, a technician will need to visit each machine, configure the settings, download and install updates, run a series of validation exercises to confirm the successful migration. One of the first things you'll need to do is identify the team members, right? So what should be the key skills that the team members would need? You have to ask that question when you're trying to build a team. Then how do we validate a proposed team member has the key skills? You have to either interview them or you have to assign a SME to work alongside that team member to assess and analyze the skills, isn't it? And then what type of information will the project's resource schedule contain? If it is 7,000 laptops across 5 states, every single laptop has to be managed personally, individually. In that case, how you are going to execute the whole undertaking? Sorry. Right? These type of questions you have to ask when you are trying to undertake such a project from a building team perspective. All right. Any questions here? Any comments? Anything? I'll take that as a no. Moving on to the next item under creating a high performing team, which is defining our team ground rules. So now that we have built a team, we are going to define the ground rules. So what would be the enablers here? First of all, collectively defining the ground rules, wherein the team members are equally participating in creating the ground rules, as is the project manager. Then comes communicating the ground rules with the team so that everybody is aware and everybody abides by those ground rules. Then we have the establishment of an environment that can foster adherence to those ground rules. That is essentially removing any kind of situations or factors which can impact the adherence to those particular ground rules from the team's environment. And then managing and rectifying the ground rule violations as soon as they are identified. So by doing this, we will be able to create our team charter and the team norms as deliverables. And when we are creating these deliverables, what kind of tools we can use? We can use negotiation skills, right? To negotiate with all the team members on what kind of ground rules are practical and what are not, or what are necessary and essential and what are not. If in case there's a conflict between 2 or more team members, in that case, as a project manager, how do you manage and resolve that conflict? Also put the team in a same meeting, in a same setup, and try to brainstorm and extract ideas, as well as maintaining the ethics and principles within the team, that nobody should be doing something which is unjustified. Correct? So now, if we again group these together from a table or chart point of view, this is how we can bring together all the different activities or enablers together, right? So first of all, under enablers, we will have the collectively defining the ground rules, communicating the ground rules with the team, establishing an environment, and managing and rectifying the ground rule violations. Then team norms is a separate item. Code of ethics is a separate item. Team charter and ground rules, being documents, can be clubbed together. Negotiation skills and team member skills, team member communication, being communication related activities or undertakings, they can be clubbed together. And then conflict management is a different item. So it has to be put separately and it has to be managed separately, right? So when we are creating the team charter, in terms of defining our ground rules, ideally the team charter should be produced by the team, or at least with the team's active participation. Okay, the team charter can and should be reviewed and updated as needed on a periodic basis. So when we create certain project documents, we call them as living documents, such as stakeholder register or risk register, the assumptions log, the team charter. These are called as the resource calendars. These are called as the living documents because they keep on getting updated throughout the course of the project. Right? So all these ground rules related activities and inputs should be there in the team charter based on the team's active participation. Now, apart from team charter, we also spoke about the code of ethics, right? What is the code of ethics? The code of ethics is a document which is supplied by PMI. If you go and open this link from this PPT, you will be able to go to the code of ethics directly. Okay, this code of ethics is, I think, 8 pages. Yes, code of ethics is 8 pages. It is applicable to all PMI members or whoever is not a PMI member but meets one or more of these following criteria. Somebody who holds the PMI certification, somebody who has applied to take up a certification, or somebody who serves PMI in a voluntary capacity. This code of ethics applies to all of them. So what this code of ethics talks about is basically how you should conduct yourself in a professional and practical manner when executing and working on a project. Right? This is a good to have knowledge. You need not memorize it. Whenever you get time, just read through the document once to understand what is the expectation out of you once you become a PMI associated professional. All right. Now, talking about our ground rules. Ground rules include all the actions that are considered acceptable and unacceptable. High performance teams needs to have visibility into each other's work so that if in case any team members get stuck with their piece of work, some other team member can pitch in, can step in and help the team member. Plus, they will also understand how their lack of progress is impacting other people's work. Right? Then having clear rules on expectations and communication and understanding how to manage the conflicts. These are essentially all our ground rules. Now, talking about our negotiation skills, all the team members should develop good skills in negotiating among themselves and with other stakeholders as required. Because if they do not do this, they will essentially get into one or the other conflict. So that is why they should have a justifiable and practical negotiation skill, wherein they can manage most of the negotiations themselves and they need not come and disturb the project manager again and again for every single thing. Right? Then our brainstorming. This is a common technique for helping a team to identify and prioritize options on how to address ground rules issues, where a facilitator works with the team to identify a series of potential solutions to a solution to a given problem. Okay. Brainstorming is basically wherein you bring a group of people together and they try to analyze the potential options based on everybody's common understanding. Okay. Now, next scenario. You're forming the team for the migration project and you want to help the team begin working through establishing in norms and defining how they will work together to accomplish the project objectives. You organize an internal team meeting, initial team meeting. Now, first of all, you need to identify what are the key areas in the team charter that the team should cover. Second is, what should the team consider when interacting with non-team stakeholders, which is external stakeholders. And as a project manager, how would you create a healthy environment that does not have the lack of trust, politics, or lack of healthy team culture? So whenever you are setting up a team meeting, all these items, all these thoughts should be running in your head as a project manager to ensure that the team is able to interact effectively, efficiently, keeping in mind and honoring the ground rules that have been laid out. All right. Our next topic is negotiating project agreements. But before that, are there any questions, concerns, or comments?
Not from my side.
So the one question, see, whatever we are discussing here, like, see, every domain has certain tasks, right? So are we going through, this is an like task 1, task 2 in the ECO that you showed.
Correct.
So if I mean, see, in the ECO for domains, like domain 1 for people, you have managed conflict as task 1, lead a team, support team performance as task 3, etc. So, but are we going through this, whatever material that we are discussing, are we going through this every task, or I mean, I'm just trying to understand how we are trying to go through this entire syllabus. So is it, so whatever you're teaching, is it that under domain we started with domain people, and then under that we are going through every task, or?
So basically, how the content is created for this preparation course is for you to understand how the sequence flows and how the sequence are related to each of these domains, and under each of these domains individually what all tasks we are performing to eventually complete that piece of sequence.
Okay. Okay, sure. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
No problem. So it's 9:30 now. Let's take a quick 10-minute break and we'll meet at 9:40. And then I'm not planning to give any more breaks unless you guys ask for. So this will be the last break for this session. All right. Let's take a 10-minute break and come back.